Ja, ich meine, Sie sind ja nicht ganz ohne Grund hier und die nächste Stunde oder so wird auf Englisch sein. Ich hoffe, es ist niemand unter Ihnen, der nicht des Englischen mächtig ist. Und unser Gast ist Rosa. Okay, we'll start talking, and afterwards, if you have questions and if we see you, we will allow questions from the audience.
It's nice on my detached.
You once said that you got interested in comics even before you could read, thanks to the comics your sister had collected.
Yes, she wasn't actually a collector. She was just a hoarder. She just kept every comic book she got from the late 40s on. So I was, from the moment I was born, she was 11 years older. So when I was born in 1951, the house was already filled with Dell Comics, which that was the biggest publisher in America, well, in the history of America. Had all the licenses, not just the Disney comics, but the Warner Brothers and the MGM, and all the movies and all the TV shows. And of course, her best comics were her Donald Duck comics by that good artist, whoever he was. And so I grew up looking at those before I could read them. And also the other thing was, my favorite thing that she had in her hoard was her Mad comics and her Mad magazines by Harvey Kurtzman and Will Ehrlich. So you see evidence of both those types of comics in my set.
So one day she gave them to you? Or did you
Well,
simply grab them?
No, she would, when I was a little kid, she would just loan me a stack at a time from the attic closet. And then when I returned those, I could have another stack. But then she grew up and got married and moved out, and I inherited them. And I still have a few of them, but I got rid of all of them about 1961. I think maybe because I was reading comics from such a very early age, I seemed to outgrow them. I think when most kids are getting interested in it, like when I was 9 or 10 years old, I think what happened was the first ones I bought, I can even remember the ones they were. I went to the store, and for the first time, instead of buying my sister's comics, I pointed to the ones I wanted, the Donald Duck comics I wanted, and I didn't like them. So I just stopped asking my parents for any comics, and I think I moved on to monster magazines and kept up with the Mad magazines. But they were just issues that hadn't happened to be by Karl Barks. You know, I'm just a little kid. I don't know there's a certain particular artist. I knew some stories I thought were fascinating, but maybe I thought they were all done by the same artist. Or if this artist wasn't in every single issue, you know, he was gone. So, but I think Barks was still busy for another 7 or 8 years after that. But I just thought I outgrew them about when I was 9 or 10 years old.
But after you had sold your comics, you bought them back later on.
Well, I started, I went through the Monster magazine phase, which was a big fad in America in the early 1960s. And then about 1963, I started collecting Superman comics. I discovered those. And from there, I think about 1967, I discovered Marvel comics and so many other, of course, even in those days, all we had were primarily superhero comics, because the Disney comics and all the funny animal comics, by the 70s, comics in America weren't selling. You know, it's too big a country, and people of cities are too far apart for the magazine distribution system, which still works in Europe. They couldn't make money off comic books, so so it was still just the superhero comics, and so I branched out to Marvel, and I think I was looking for a used comic book store once, about 1966, 67, and here was a used, it was Gold Key Comics had the Disney license then, and what I saw was a reprint of, I think, The Golden Helmet by Karl Barks. I think that was on one of the stories in the issue, and the other story in the issue was something called The Old Castle Secret, which I'd never heard of. That was before my sister's time. That's before she started saving comics. But on the cover it said, reprinted by popular demand. It was the first time a comic book had been reprinted, virtually in America. they weren't doing reprints. You know, it was always new stories. So what caught my attention was it was my favorite story, The Golden Helmet, and it was reprinted by popular demand. So other people liked this story, and other people liked this writer and artist, or whoever it was. So I bought that, and then also read this story, The Old Castle Secret, which was so much more depth to it. It was what Parks was doing in around 1948. And this was like an old movie. It was just so scary, and so much detail. So at that point, I started regaining the collection that I probably had traded for 2-for-1 for Superman comics. I got rid of my sister's entire collection. But yeah, over the next few years, I got them all back, plus all the issues she didn't have. I got all the Disney comics and all the Warner Brothers, and and I started collecting comics in 1968. Certainly not just Disney comics. I don't really like Disney comics. I like Karl Barks comics. But besides that, I like the old superheroes, or particularly the EC comics. Those are the best comics ever published.
Taking it from the film about your house, I think you've got one of the largest comic book collections in the United States.
Well, by that time it was depleted. I sold. People were advising me. I stopped buying new comics about 1985. The comics published through the 70s and 80s that was starting to get into pure Marvel type superheroes, like the early superheroes, but then they were getting too serious. And I just lost interest, and I knew there was really nice comics being printed and published in Europe. So I just lost interest in the American comic industry. And about 5-6 years ago, comic dealer friends were advising me to sell all of my comics from 1970s through the 80s. Because I had like an unread condition, and there was a market for them. So I think after that, or before that video was filmed by my friend Yano, I'd already sold like 10 or 15,000 comics, but they were all the ones I called the new comics, like 1970 to 1985, that I really didn't care about. So when that was filmed, there was already lots of gaps on the shelves. But since then, I've started collecting lots of other old comics that I didn't already have, like some TV westerns, and so it's an exhaustive collection. They're not, in all top shape. They're in nice shape, but they're not in investor quality. I don't care about that. But I love to get full sets.
But you've also got another collection like TV guides,
lots
and
of
stuff like that.
Yeah, I couldn't begin to name all that. I still got all the monster magazines I had as a kid, and I got a full set of TV guides. I just bought a set of Playboy magazines about a year ago. All of the 50s and 60s. We want to get into all the different collections. I've always been a collector since I was a little tiny kid.
And you've got as you told me once, the largest collection of TV show openings.
TV themes, yeah. It started about 1970. I think I started recording television theme songs with my little cassette recorder and a microphone in front of the... and in about I had like 16 hours of TV themes. I think about 1980, somebody found out about it, some radio station. There's apparently radio station advisors or consultants, and this company that was a consultant of radio stations contacted me and wanted me to sell tape collections of my TV themes to all their client radio stations all over North America. So I did that I made some extra money doing that back when I first got married. I remember for $500 they could have my collection of TV themes. And now after the internet, there's other people who collect TV themes, put them on websites, and I found a few that I didn't have. So now I've got it on a set of CDs. We put it all on computer, and that's another one of my collection.
Wasn't it difficult to get to tape the end themes with all of the voiceovers in the States?
I did get the end themes. Very rarely did I get the end themes, because they'd always have put ads on it. But I have all the opening themes, and I don't start having people shout out TV themes that they want me to sing the opening theme songs. It'll go on all night. I love to do that.
Not counting the comics that you did as a 6-year-old,
Yeah.
which I found
6 all
That's
the
what
way
you
in.
did?
Yeah.
You started out as a cartoonist at the university paper, the Kentucky Colonel.
Yeah, I was studying civil engineering, but when I was the first day got there as a freshman, I went and asked them if they wanted an editorial cartoonist, and I remember still that this was 1969. And, oh, they were so excited. It's apparently very rare to have an editorial cartoonist at a college newspaper.
Did you work for that because you like to write stories or preferred to draw stories? Or was it a combination?
No, I was just doing political cartoons then.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember at that particular time, I wasn't too interested in politics. Not like I got maybe 10 years later intensely interested, but I was probably too much of a nerdy comic book TV fan. So they would give me the ideas for the editorial cartoons, and there were some strong ones in those days. That was like around the Summer of Love in 1969, and the riots on the college campuses. So I lived all through that, and I did political cartoons. And I remember I did one political cartoon that got the newspaper thrown off campus. It had to become an independent newspaper and not supported by the university. They told me because of one of my cartoons. But then I did do a newspaper strip. That's when I did the fertility paper.
Yeah.
That's what I really wanted to do. I wasn't interested in the political cartoons, but I liked doing humor adventure stories that were like the Uncle Scrooge stories that I used to do.
Was
That I used to read.
Was it always intended to run along the lines of E-movies, sort of making it a precursor to the Indiana Jones movies?
How can I know it was a precursor to the Indiana Jones?
Well,
and
in
retrospect, I was maybe, no, I didn't see them as old movies. They were just adventure comedies, which were what old movies, good adventures were always comedies also. That's why, in about 1980, that would have been about 6 years later, or maybe 8 years later, when Steven Spielberg did Indiana Jones, he was just imitating the old adventure movies were always partly comedies.
Okay. Did you start your Captain Kentucky while you were also doing the fertility papers? Or kind of
No, that was after I graduated and I was working in the family construction company. I was already known in Louisville, where I live in Kentucky, as a local eccentric because people knew I was a comic book collector and I'd be interviewed about that sometimes, or I was interviewed once about the fertility papers and then one day the editor of the Saturday entertainment section called me and asked me if I'd do a weekly newspaper, like Sunday size strip. And I was wondering what I'd do, and I decided to, since I thought superheroes were just silly ideas, I did a comedy superhero, Captain Kentucky instead of Captain America, or Captain Britain. But I'd use actual people and actual settings in Louisville, and I thought it would be sensational. I thought it would be known all over the country overnight. Nobody ever read it. People in America especially in those days, didn't read comics, and it didn't seem to thrill them that I was using actual local personalities and politicians. And, so I did that just for, it was like doing it for free. I'd spend 12 or 13 hours a week on it, and I got paid $25. And for that much time, I could walk along the expressway and collect pop bottles and make more money. So I was just doing it for fun, and it only got, I guess I only quit because during that period, those 3 years, I got married, and I built a house, or bought a house, and had pets, and it's too much other stuff to do, and it was depressing that, nobody seemed to read it, so I just, I killed off my main character, and discontinued the strip, obviously, and put my old beaten up, like I think it's a child's drawing table. This little tiny thing that my father bought me 15 years earlier. I just packed it away down in the basement. I was in about 1981. And I was never going to draw again. I just lost interest in it.
And who among the characters in the fertility papers and Captain Kentucky was based on John Rosa?
Just the main character. But nobody knew that.
And you killed him off?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my goodness. While you were doing the fertility papers, you also started doing indices for fanzines and starting a Scrooge McDuck index.
Well, I think that was the first one I did, but that was in yeah, fanzine, and then maybe a year after that, I took over the main article, main feature, and biggest American comics fan magazine. I think it had a circulation of 1,800, the entire circulation. It was the biggest one at the time, and the previous writer had answered questions about comic books. But I had to, when I took it over, I had to expand it to all the things I was interested in. So I had to answer questions about television and movies and radio shows. And I like to think that in those days, I was the only public source you could go to for an answer about an old TV show or to get a list of a TV episode guide, because I get them out of my TV guide collection. Back in years ago, they would list the title of every episode of the TV show, and the writer and the director and the list of the characters and all the actors. It was only three stations, so they had plenty of room to do that. But I was the only place you could go. Anybody could go. There was only 1,800 people that could do it. Could get an answer about an old movie or an old TV show. Now, thank God, we've got the internet. Any question you've got in the history of the world, you can go to the internet and get maybe an accurate answer.
So you were the precursor of all
I was the precursor of the internet, yes.
Yeah.
As far as answers to questions about TV and movies and comics.
Well, you know, in Germany it was a little bit different. There was only one station at first, and what they offered newspapers as information was about 2 lines per show, and in some cases they didn't even state that it was Disney material. So
that's good.
Which I think should please you,
sure,
because you had your troubles with the Disney people. How'd you get to work for the Rocket's Blast Comics Collective? Was that, and later on the Comic Reader and other fanzines, was that thanks to your comics or to your information center?
Both, I guess. I just knew all these people, so they knew I was willing to write articles for them, and I just loved writing the articles and doing comic strips, so it was all for free, so.
Okay. As you said, you put away your drawing stuff in '82, thinking it would be for good.
Mm-hmm.
But when you saw the Gladstone Disney reprints, you decided to have another go at it. And you called it a person called Byron Erickson, who by now is one of the heads of Gutenberg Hus and Egmont in Europe. And then was Gladstone's editor. And what happened?
Well, I just, when I saw that they were reprinting the comics, it was the first Disney publisher. I don't know how much people in Europe or Germany in general know about American comics. The Disney comics disappeared in the 1970s because nobody was buying comics, and the publisher I mentioned, Dell, and later called Bold Key, it was actually a company called Western Publishing. It was a company like Egmont. It was huge. It had all the best-selling comic books. But it also, like Egmont, it published lots of other things, books and newspapers and magazines, coloring books and games. And so when comic books stopped selling, they just dropped them. So the Disney comic books disappeared. All the Funny Animal comics, all comics for children disappeared for about 10 years. And then the people you're talking about, the Gladstone people, a fellow named Bruce Hamilton, actually got a license for Disney comics over all of North America because nobody else wanted it. Like 3 people company in Arizona, in a small town in Arizona. And they published these, and I started appearing on newsstands, and I saw it. I knew these guys. I'd known Bruce Hamilton for years. He was a comics fan. And of course, the thing about the Gladstone comics, they were named after Gladstone Gander, for luck. That's in America, what's that character's name in German?
Gustav Ganz.
Yeah.
Which is very confusing because there's a Gascous.
Oh.
Or, who in Germany is called Franz Ganz.
Oh.
So, but this is only confusing to people who know all of them. And,
but I saw the comics, and I called up Byron Erickson, who I already knew, and I said I was born to write and draw one Uncle Scrooge adventure. That's what I dreamt of since I was a tiny child. And I'd actually already done it. The first story I did in the Perquillian papers, I thought of as an Uncle Scrooge adventure.
It was the son of the
Son of the Sun. And I told him it was my manifest destiny. I remember those words, and he'll confirm that. I said I was born to do it. I knew it would happen someday, but I was just going to do one. And I did that one, and I enjoyed it. I was good at, every other day working at the family construction company, or by then running the family construction company. And I did it. I figured that would be all, and it was published and was nominated in the first Harvey Awards, which were the sort of the main awards before the Eisner Awards. I think the Eisner Awards superseded them or took over because the Eisner Awards are in San Diego, which is more important than whenever the Harvey Awards were located. But the first Harvey Awards, that first story I'd ever done, professional story, was nominated as the best comic book of the year. So that caught my attention, and I got so much fan mail, people appreciated it, so I thought I'd do one more, and I'd do one more, and 6 months later I liquidated the family 85-year-old construction company, and I guess I decided it was more interesting to carry on, or to follow in the footsteps of Karl Barks than my own father and grandfather. And I figured I knew what tiny little bit that Gladstone paid was not much, but when I was running the construction company, it was easy. You know, I just figured the jobs and managed the labor, and most of the days I might just sit and read a book between figuring jobs. And at the end of the year, I'd have money, but it would be spent. And I thought, maybe doing Uncle Scrooge comic books, at the end of the year, I'd have a year's worth of Uncle Scrooge comic books that would live forever. I still didn't know anybody like them, but at least they exist. And I thought that was a much nicer way to literally live my childhood dream. I can't imagine how many people in their life, in the world, can ever literally live their childhood dream. I remember thinking when I first started, I knew I was going to continue to be writing and drawing Uncle Scrooge comics. I used to daydream that being at a reception at some castle in Europe, and somebody coming up to me at the buffet saying, "I'm the personal physician of the Queen of England." I said, "Oh, I write and draw Uncle Scrooge comic book." Because that to me was just the most wonderful thing I could possibly do. Do something and pay homage to Karl Barks.
Did you do any other adaptations of your non-Disney work for the Ducks?
Did I do what?
Did you do other adaptations
of
your
yes.
stories for the Ducks? Like, for example?
Oh, I did one about, and I never liked it. The Son of the Sun was good. That was it, made a good Duck story. But I did the story about going to the center of the earth with universal solvent. That didn't make a good Duck story. It was a good, but not a good Duck story. It was too serious. It involved the end of all life on Earth. And I did one about, I redid as a Duck story about going back in time and visiting the historical King Arthur, who was just a seedy barbarian, and because if he existed when King Arthur was supposed to exist, and that was made an interesting fertility page story, but I didn't like that as a Duck story either. And there were a few other ones.
So, as you just mentioned, that you liquidated the family company.
The Rosa company.
Rosa company. That sounds Italian.
Oh yes, my grandfather came over from Magnago near Venice around the year 1900. I don't know why he settled in Louisville, Kentucky. I think he got thrown off the train. He could have settled in Orlando and bought land. He ended up in...
He would have gotten rich there.
Yeah.
Buying land.
But he did good. I mean, he was totally uneducated and came just like the European childhood dream. Come to America and get rich. That's what he did. And then he went back to Italy and went to Venice and married I think he was a show-off. I don't remember. He died when I was young. Since he was uneducated, he married the daughter of the head of the school department, and it was a famous family, the direct descendant of Titiano, and then started his family in Italy and moved back to America.
Interesting.
His name was Joaquino. They called it Kino for short. That was his nickname.
So that's how
my name, yeah. My name is actually Joaquino Dante Hugo Rosa.
Oh my goodness.
But they Americanized that to Kino Don Hugo Rosa. Well, I tell you, there's more to that story. When I was born, I was the first male descendant of the Rosa family. I was the last of the clan Rosa, like the last of the clan McDuck. And my father did not name me after my grandfather, which in the Italian families, that's a terrible crime. The first male grandson has to be named, and he disowned my father and threw him out of the business. And I think it was until I was 4 or 5 years old, they came to a deal where, this is what they told me. My grandfather paid my father $1,000 to change my name to Kino. That's why I've got 4 names instead of 3. They just, on the birth certificate, there's Kino is kind of penciled in the front. So my father got paid the $1,000 and I never got a share of it. So I'm already, when I started doing Disney comics, I was already used to people making money off my name and not sharing it. It had been happening my whole life.
Well, actually, the Disney people didn't want to return the originals to you, did they?
Well, that was, I was working, I'd gone to work for Gladstone, like we were saying, and at some point, Disney just told Gladstone, I'm not working for Disney. I always stop every interview to make sure everybody knows that Disney has never had anything to do with comic books. They didn't create the characters, they didn't create the storylines. It's all done by freelancers like Karl Barks and me and hundreds of others working for totally independent publishers who have a license. So all the work belongs to Disney, even though they have nothing whatsoever to do with it. Disney licensed the name Donald Duck to the Dell Comic Company in 1942. And Donald Duck is just an actor in animated cartoons, short animated cartoons. Every cartoon is like a different character. So they license the name Donald Duck, and Dell hires Karl Barks to create a character out of this Donald Duck, because you can't do a comic book without, Donald Duck throwing walnuts at Chippendale, and you have to actually have a character. So everybody knows Karl Barks. He created everything the world knows about Donald Duck and created Uncle Scrooge and all the other characters. But it's Disney's property because it's all done under a license.
Well, he invented Donald as somebody who could really talk.
Well, yeah.
Whereas in the animated cartoons,
yeah, when I was sent to the show and people walk up to it, they see I'm doing Donald Duck and they imitate that stupid duck voice, and I say, no, that's Disney's Donald Duck. This is Karl Barks' Donald Duck. He talks normal. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so I was working for Gladstone Comics, and Disney told them not to return artwork. The artwork, the point I was making is I didn't work for Disney, so it can't be Disney property. Money never traveled in that direction. So Disney could only order my publisher to hold my artwork. They could order him to break the law. But publisher can't do anything about it because they have to do what Disney said. So they told me that they could no longer return my personal property. This was before scanning. I'd have to send the actual artwork in 1987. So.
Did you ever get those originals back?
Well, eventually, yeah.
Okay.
Well, but the thing was, there was only one story, because I couldn't work for a company that was going to steal my art. And I'd already liquidated the company, so I had to quit. And I finished one story. I got that artwork back sometime or other. But then I was unemployed, and I'd already liquidated my construction company. And I was still, I'd grown up as a Disney fan. I hadn't already grown to hate the company by then. But this company that I thought I'd devoted much of my life, collecting Disney toys and Disney, they're trying to destroy me. So I had to quit. Fortunately, my wife was a teacher. She had a steady job, and she paid the bills. So there was a year there where I was unemployed, and I didn't know how we were going to pay the mortgage or buy food.
Was that when you started working for European companies like Oberon or something?
No, not yet. First odd thing that happened was Disney contacted me. Disney Television Animation. They'd already contacted me. They were doing that show DuckTales, which was a bad imitation of Karl. I shouldn't say bad, it was a good show, but it wasn't the real thing. It was their version of Karl Marx's comics. And they wanted me to work on that show, but I said, well, I'd rather do comics. I was still doing the Gladstone comics. So now they contacted me and they wanted me to do a new show called Tailspin. I don't know if anybody, that was ever in Germany, but that was another Disney television cartoon show, I guess 1989.
Tailspin.
Yeah, it was like the characters from Jungle Book. Turned in. It was good. It was imitation of, influenced by Miyazaki, Japanese animated cartoons. Miyazaki is a director of animation and an artist in Japanese animated features. And they're all, I think, 100 times better than any Disney animated feature ever made. But this was an imitation of his cartoons, and so I went out there and I got the job as a screenwriter. It was funny, I never intended to be a comic book writer or artist, because I knew people had moved to New York City and worked years to break into that industry. I never intended to do it, and I just stumbled into it overnight by doing this one story for Little Gladstone Comics. And after that, I never intended to be a TV screenwriter, and it's suddenly overnight I'm a TV screenwriter. So I wrote the first 2 episodes of Tailspin, I think they were animated in France or somewhere where they get them cheap. And they weren't the first, it wasn't the first episodes shown on television, but anyway, and I got paid well, and in fact, one of them, they filmed exactly word for word the way I wrote it, and the other one, they totally changed. They give me a synopsis. This is what they want the episode to be about, and this is supposed to happen, and so I farmed a screenplay. And anyway, they rejected that and rewrote it themselves, but they still paid me, and they said, well, I did exactly what they asked, but they had to see it done that way to see that wouldn't work. So I remember thinking, I can't really take much pride in getting paid for work that they had no use for. And I also really couldn't enjoy just doing a screenplay. I like doing a comic book, and I like both writing and drawing. Rather than just a screenwriter, then I'm the director, and I'm the choreographer, and I'm the sound technician, and I do everything. It's like
you're also the actor. The actor is.
Oh, I'm the director of the actors. No, it's Karl Marx's characters are the actors.
Yeah, but you're acting them.
Well, I guess
acting
so.
them out.
Although, if you've ever done written for a character, sometimes you don't control what you're writing. The character controls it. You have to do it with the character. So I did 2 episodes of that, and then I found out I could. I still didn't know that Disney comic books were still the best-selling comic books around the world outside of North America. Who would imagine that? I'm probably still like a typical American. I figure if it's not happening in America, it's not happening anywhere. But now I've learned that there's a lot of stuff happening in America that's much nicer.
So the European companies get interested in your work and ask you to work for them.
Well,
Did you ask them?
I asked them. I had first, like I say, just learning that the biggest Disney comic publisher was this company called Gutenbergers. Now it's Egmont, which is part of EHOPA, or EHOPA is part of Egmont. So I got that address from my friends at Gladstone, and I sent what we used to call a telegram. I think their poor people are out of business now.
Don't know what that is?
Yeah, you'd go to an office and write out some sentences, and then they would send it on their telegraph machine. This is about 1990. I mean, we could have called, but for me to call long distance to Europe was... plus, you know, people don't know now, long distance is virtually free. You know, you pay a fee for... In those days, it was like $20 a minute to talk to Europe. Anyway, I sent a telegram to whom it may concern, that they use another person to write or draw comics. And a few days later, I got a call from somebody claiming to be in Europe. But I wasn't going to fall for it right away, but I thought it was a friend of mine playing a trick on me, who knew that I had sent this telegram, and they said, yes, I could work for them. What I didn't know was that when you do work for one Disney publisher, all the other Disney publishers in the world can use it without even paying or even telling me. So they've been using these stories that I'd done for Little Gladstone, and apparently at least a certain number of the readers liked it, maybe the Barks fans or the older readers. They said, yeah, they'd like me to work for them. And I said, what kind of stories could I do? I wanted to do long adventure stories. Any kind of story you want. And I said, will I get the artwork back? Well, sure. He said, nobody had ever asked for the artwork back. I said, all right. And I think I'd written to them, they asked me how much did I need to get paid. And I told them what Gladstone paid, which, as I recall, was $70 a page, both for the writing and the art. It's preposterously low, even in those days. But that's all they could afford. And actually, Gladstone lost money whenever I did a story for them, because they didn't sell that many comics. But they didn't want to be thought of as strictly a reprint company. So they were willing to pay me a few times a year to do a new story, and then they weren't strictly reprints. But $70 a page, which I could just barely make a living at that, as long as my wife had her job. So I said $70 a page, and they said they'd think about it. I hung up, and then I got to thinking right away, I should at least ask for an average amount. Why should I ask for this incredibly low that I knew Gladstone could only afford, but maybe this biggest publisher in the world, they can afford just an average amount. So I sent another telegram and mentioned, could I have this much? Which was, I think somebody told me, some friend in the industry, was the average amount for both writing and art. And then another call came the next day. And the person had received that telegram, so now I knew it wasn't a joke. This person knew what was in the telegram, and I hadn't told anybody about that. So I actually suspected it was a practical joke. And they said no, that neither one of those amounts were acceptable, and they were going to pay me this much, which was much higher than what I was asking for. And apparently they were just scared, since I was an American, I was going to want too much pay, and I was asking for too little. So from then on, I went to work for Egmont. So I started out, and soon afterwards, they needed a new editor, and I recommended Byron Erickson. The thing about Gladstone comics, different from the Dell comics, although those were excellent comics, these were people who were more concerned about giving credit to the writers and artists. They always gave credit, and even though Disney told them that not to, they said they didn't care. These people deserve credit. Well, I'd like to mention that too. The whole world of Disney fans owes a great debt of gratitude to Bruce Hamilton, because he insisted to give full credits to all the writers and artists. And slowly, over the next 10 years, other companies, especially Egmont, noticed what I'd always told them, and what American comic publishers have known since the EC days. If you tell, that was the big deal in the Dell comics and all those, they don't want to, they think it's charming to hide the names of the writers and artists and make everybody think it's a Walt Disney product. Of course, it's not. But when you tell the readers the names of the writers and artists, the stories become much more popular, because the readers have a connection with actual human beings producing this stuff. So over the next 10 or 15 years, after the world's tiniest Disney publisher started giving all of the credits, all the writers and artists, every other Disney publisher in the world, except one, started giving credit to all the writers and artists. And that all started from Little Gladstone Comics in Prescott, Arizona, back in 1987. The only company that doesn't still is the one in Hollow. And don't ask me why not. They still think it's charming for everybody to think Walt Disney, even though he's frozen somewhere, he's writing. So anyway, there I was now. But Byron Erickson, they needed a new editor, and I suggested Byron Erickson because he, like I was saying about everybody at Gladstone, he really passionately loved these comics, and he loved the writers and artists. He knew everything about Karl Marx and Floyd Gottfredson and so on. It wasn't just a job, it was his passion. So I suggested they contact him, and now, ever since then, he's been working at, now it's called Egmont. What I was going to say is, he and I went from working at the world's tiniest Disney publisher within 2 years to the world's biggest Disney publisher, and I was still working for him just the same way I was working at Gladstone. So it was amazing several years of my life right there. It's still like a dream.
Recently I found out that in the 1940s, Walt Disney once went to King Features, who were publishing the comic strips, the Disney comic strips, and asked them after the strike which he had in his company, and asked them, would it be possible to put the names Voigt Fritzen and El Taliaferro on the strips? And King Features told him, are you crazy? You have to keep Disney on. So that's why he never put the names of the creators of the comics. I think today,
Because it was King Features?
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm still a Walt Disney the person fan. The modern corporation,
Yeah.
Walt Disney the person, I'm still a huge Walt Disney fan.
Oh, I met him once here in Munich, just like I met you.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah,
But
I've heard
that's
that.
beside the point. You stated repeat. Oh no, you started the Life of Scrooge McDuck in 1993. Was that something you had suggested, or that Egmont wanted?
Well, let's see. Disney had actually, I always say Disney's never had anything to do with publishing their comics, but they did for 2 years. They took the Gladstone's license. They saw how well Gladstone was doing, actually successfully marketing Disney comic books in North America for the first time in a decade. So they took the license away and they decided they were going to do it themselves, and they actually were saying within a year they'd be bigger than Marvel because they're Disney and they know how to do everything right. And within 6 months of when they took over the publication of their own comics, they lost like 80% of the readership because they didn't know the characters. They didn't know anything about these characters. They didn't know the style. They didn't know the feel. And readers, the Disney Disney Comics fans, they knew that these were not people who loved the comics. These aren't my words. I remember the people in Europe, because they were still selling better. The American Disney comics were still selling better in Europe than they were in America. People would say they could tell these were not people who really respected the material. They just wanted their money, so they stopped buying. So they gave up after 2 years, and so what was, I lost the train of thought.
Yeah, the question was, did you suggest the
Oh
Life of
yes,
Scrooge McDuck?
so during that time when they were publishing, one of the people there was Bob Foster, who was one of the assistant editor, and he is a guy who loves all comics, especially the old Disney comics, and somebody in Disney marketing had looked at the superhero comics that were being published, all the mini-series and maxi-series, all marketing ploys to get people to, because you can't get people to buy a regular American comic book steadily. You have to have something special, like a mini-series or 5 different covers on the same comic, or screwball things like that. So somebody suggested they do a 12-part series of the Life of Scrooge. They didn't know anything about Scrooge, but he, a wealthy, elderly character. They thought somebody. So Bob Foster called me and he said, nobody over there at Disney knew anything about the character, and he asked me if I would do it. I said, well, I knew I wouldn't work for them. They'd already tried to get me to work for them instead of Egmont. I didn't want to work for Disney at all. I wanted to work for these nice giant European publishers. But I said I would suggest it to Egmont. But I remember how I approached Egmont. I said, now, Disney Comics is going to hire somebody to do this series. And no matter how bad it is, and I'm sure it would have been bad, it would become official because Disney did it. And I said, Egmont. To me, Egmont, originally Dell is the true spiritual owner of Uncle Scrooge. That's the company that created Uncle Scrooge. Western Publishing is actually the name of the company. They were the moral owner of Scrooge McDuck and everything the world knows about Duckburg. But by 1990, that was more like Egmont. Egmont was, or Gutenberg was the world's biggest Disney publisher and had all the best writers and artists working for them. I said, Egmont has got to do this first. And I wasn't telling them I should do it, but I said, they've got to do it first and beat them to the punch. And then what I was hoping would happen is they said, okay, why don't you do it? I said, oh, me. Okay. So that was another great, this was a period of maybe 5 years in my life, which was one fantastic thing happening after.
You have stated repeatedly that basically you have put the stories in a time frame of the 1950s.
Yeah, the new stories, yeah.
Yeah. Was that because you felt that considering that people age, you would one day have to deal with the demise of Scrooge?
No,
And you didn't want to?
I just knew that, for Scrooge to have done, especially if I was doing the life of Scrooge, if I was going to have him doing the things in the years that Marx said in the stories that he did, he still couldn't be alive. He'd be 130 or 140 years old. So I decided, and it would also be fun to set the stories in the same years of the comics that I was reading. So I decided, well, it's like a Sherlock Holmes story. They're usually, not always, but they're usually set in the 1890s, Victorian England. So I was going to set all of my Scrooge stories in the like early to mid 1950s. It wouldn't be very evident to the reader. Sometimes in the background they might see a date on a calendar or something, but you know, naturally the editor wouldn't let me mention it blatantly, but it was more fun to do it sort of as a private joke. I just got a kick out of it. Was sort of like sending the stories back in time to myself. And I was sitting on the couch in the late 50s reading my sister's comics, sending a story back to myself in a time machine. Or it was like, another thing I used to think about, somebody who grows up as a kid loving the 1958 New York Yankees baseball team. That's their favorite team of all time, and they love baseball so much, and they grow up in the next 20 years, they practice and they become a baseball player, a star baseball player, and they join a team, but instead of joining a team in like 1985, they join the 1958 New York Yankees. That's sort of what I felt like I did. I was going back in time and doing stories set right when I was enjoying reading.
So the stories taking place in the 50s don't have television or much?
Oh, they have black and white television.
Yeah.
When I could control, and originally, of course, I had no control over the presentation of my stories. I do now, if they want to put my name on them, they have to, because I trademarked my name.
Like Disney, the
yeah.
Disney company trademarked
Yeah.
Disney.
So they don't have to pay any attention to me because they're not my stories, they're Disney's property. But if they want to put my name on the cover and sell them under my name, they've got to print it exactly the way I want it. The words have to be right, and the ones in Germany now are done that way. The Ehoppe and Egmont have always been nice and agreeable to that. But, so again, I lost your, I talk so much I drift.
You didn't lose
Yeah.
anything. But you stayed in the 50s with
Yeah.
that stories because you thought anything
the first
else
one.
would be impossible.
Yeah. It was just for my own personal amusement.
Nevertheless, you have made an allowance for Uncle Scrooge to appear beyond his death, which you have depicted on several pages. For example, yeah, there's one poster which shows
It's caused me a lot
Uncle
of trouble.
Scrooge.
That was done for a journalist, the journalist. Oh, the poster you're talking about. I'm talking about the death scene. The 2007. Oh, the 60th anniversary.
Yeah. So he's still
poster.
alive and kicking there. So.
No, he's not.
Oh yes, he is.
No,
Is that an actor?
that was a representation. That was a celebration of 60 years in publication.
Yeah,
that
but
wasn't a
he's
story.
He's standing there.
That was a representation of 60 years of publication. That's not, the
Okay.
things that are happening all around him aren't really happening. That's just a poster. That wasn't a story.
So who is the guy who you put into the picture, into the poster? Is that an actor?
No, that was just a representation
Okay.
of the character that was published for 60 years.
So it's just a poster?
Yeah, it's just a poster.
Inside a poster?
Yeah.
Okay. How did you feel about receiving the Eisner Award in 1995, or was it 1997? Did you feel pride, or that you
Yeah.
were doing something right?
Awarded for doing the dream of my lifetime? Yeah. Get chills thinking about it now.
What got you started on including the BUCK initials?
Well, that's the whole point of it. Everything I did was just as an homage to Karl Marx. That's the life of Scrooge. That was my purpose in doing it for Egmont. I just figured if people are going to pay attention to this story, and there's been so many other writers that do, I'm sure, excellent stories, but not the least bit based on Karl Marx's exact version. So I'm just a fanboy. I'm not really a professional. I've never thought of myself as a professional. I'm just a fanboy that somebody mistakenly allowed to draw some stories for 20 years in the comics. I figured if I was just going to take every element that Barks mentioned in any story and put it in this one series of 12 stories, and it would be firm. Now, it'd be repeated now, and anybody maybe would look back at that and they'd see the official Karl Barks version of Scrooge's life. Of course, I'd elaborate. You know, Barks would say he was in Montana in 1882, or he was in Africa in 1890 or something. So I'd have to elaborate a whole story based on that one fact. But I would never put Barks's character any place doing anything that wasn't mentioned in an old Karl Barks story.
But added one character, Dusen, the Black Knight. But that was the only one you added
later. And that was another one that was based on, you mentioned the stories based on the old Fertility papers. I'd done a story like that in the Fertility papers, and I really never wanted to add characters to the Barks universe for two reasons. I wouldn't enjoy doing a story about a character I created. For instance, in fact, one of the people here at this very convention, Dennis Kitchen, once asked me, knowing that in the years when I had to stop doing the Disney comics, by then people knew who I was and that my stories could be popular. People like him offered me a chance to create my own character, and they would publish it. I would say, I'm just too much of a fanboy. My main interest in this way of life is, if I created a character next week, I couldn't enjoy doing that much, doing stories about that, because I didn't grow up with that character. But doing stories about a character that was as alive to me as my parents were, because I was looking at it literally since birth, that's a thrill. And I said, I just would rather do somebody else's, I'd rather do Karl Barks' characters than my own. So I didn't want to create new characters for that reason, but also I didn't want to create new characters because I know, like Barks created all of those characters and none of them were his and he never got the credit for it. So I didn't want to create a new character until I had a story that I wanted to reuse another Fertility paper story. So I thought I'd create our Pinlu Saint, which was obviously, to Europeans is an imitation of our Saint Lupin, which is an old character Americans don't know anymore. And that became pretty popular, but I didn't know what else to do with him after that first story.
You finally met your idol, Karl Barks, according to my notes, on August 12, 1998. My daughter is calling me. I have to
correct.
She'll have to
Is that when it was? Yeah.
What did you feel about that meeting with Karl Barks?
Well, that originally came about because there was a period of time when less said the better, when Karl Barks had some so-called business managers who knew I was gaining popularity, and they just didn't want Barks to have any approval of anything I did. So there was a lot of propaganda, typical propaganda put out, until he fired him and sued him, and so they were out of the picture. And he invited me to. I'd never met him. I'd still never met him, but he invited me to meet with him. I think to show that there was no hard feelings and it was all propaganda put on by these other people. And one year when I was out in California at the San Diego convention, at his invitation we flew up and visited him for an afternoon. And people always want to say, gosh, what did you talk about with Karl Barks? And he just talked about the weather and looking around his house. Because I knew I've already experienced the same thing that he did. People like me, he didn't know how to handle people like me. He never intended, it was just a job to him. He was just a member of the old American work ethic. The job, he had no respect for comic books. You know, he comes from an era when comic books were junk. He wanted to be a newspaper cartoonist, like that's where the money was. But unlike a lot of any American nowadays, he had the ethic that if this is his job, he's going to do the best job he can, even if it's not a very respectable job, and that's why his comics were so good.
And even when he was more than 90 years old, he still knew all of the details of the stories he ever created.
But so I was saying that he never intended to affect so many people's lives the way he did. And I think, I don't know, but I think he's affected more people's lives in the 20th century about who they are and what they decided to do for a living and just how they think than anybody else. That's arguable, I guess. But anyway, he probably heard from decades from people like me, and now I'm hearing from people who grew up on my stories, and sometimes they say, my parents wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer, but I studied history, now I'm a teacher. And I'm thinking, oh, messed up another life. Or people, no, but seriously, people who met on some internet site and discussing my work and got married. And I'm thinking like Karl Marx did, I just wanted to entertain somebody for 15 minutes. I didn't want to change their life. No, but serious, that's kind of a creepy, not a bad creepy, but that's a scary thing. And with the power of his characters, and the fact that I had an opportunity to do them, it's very staggering and humbling that I get that. So I didn't, in other words, I didn't want to talk to him about Donald Duck or Uncle Scrooge. We just had a nice meeting. He took me out to lunch with some of his friends and talked about where he lived. And I remember I asked him about his, he played solitaire. He was an interesting guy to keep his way, he kept his mind alive for nearly 100 years. But somebody told me to ask him about how he played solitaire, and he would keep decades of records on whether he would win or lose his game of solitaire. And he showed it, he kept a graph, and he was real proud because it was going a perfect cycle. He'd win for 10 years and then lose for 10 years. So I asked him about that, and we talked about just everything about life in Oregon. And then after, at the end of the day, I was leaving, and we're walking out, the other people went ahead, and I'm walking out with Karl Marx, and I turned around and I said, I'm getting choked up right now just thinking about it. I said, no, what I would really like to talk to you about, but I know we don't need to go there. And I said, but I just want you to know that how much your work has meant to me, and it's affected my whole life. And I said, just before I leave, I have to at least say that. And he said, okay, can you do that?
But currently you aren't doing any more duck stories. You're touring, you're signing books, but you're not actually drawing stories, just posters and stuff like that.
No, but the system back in 2006, well, in all those years, when I was a kid, I had an unquenchable passion to tell stories. I was like you were mentioning, I've done comic book stories ever since my earliest memory. Well, I've still got them all. But nobody would ever see them. I just tell stories myself. But working in the Disney comic system for 20 years just totally wiped out my entire enthusiasm to tell stories. But it didn't wipe out my enthusiasm to still, like you say, come to conventions like this, and especially in Europe. I went an extra 15 years doing this frustrating work just because of a huge outpouring of gratitude from European fans. And that's one reason I wouldn't quit. As irritating as that Disney system is the European fans seem like for decades had wanted to have somebody they could express their love for these Marx characters. Marx, of course, couldn't travel over here, and most of the people who do the work are in South America. They can't speak a universal language like English, or they just don't care. But I was maybe a godsend to the publisher. I loved what I did, and I could speak English, and I didn't have a Kentucky accent like I should. or they couldn't understand me, and I was willing to travel.
The stories anyways.
Yeah. So I just love to travel around and meet with fans like me, and that's why I still think of myself as just a professional fan. But then that destroyed my enthusiasm, at least for telling stories. So in 2006, I was trying to decide, 2007, right after I did that series of posters. In fact, that poster you bring up was the last professional thing I'd done in my life. I've done a couple of special covers for reprint books since then, but that was like the end of my career right there. Because for a few weeks or months after that, I was just trying to decide what to do. I can't go on with this because there was the love was gone in telling the stories. And then it was like a blessing in disguise. My left eye said, like, so you can't make up your mind, try this. And it fell apart. So that gave me an excuse to quit. Had a retinal detachment. Now let's not get into that discussion, that's pretty hard. So after that happened, I knew I was never going to draw, I was never going to do stories again, so like I was saying before, I trademarked my name and I quit. And I quit. I didn't retire. People say, oh, how was retirement? I said, retirement when you stop working and keep getting paid? And they say, yeah, I didn't retire. I just quit. So, my wife has her pension, so that's okay. And I can make some money off the publisher who, like I say, Egmont, very well received about the whole idea. They'll pay me a small stipend a year just to put my name, and I give me the opportunity to inspect everything that they put my name on, so I'm not embarrassed by their presentation of it like I used to be. I'm always very proud of the presentation now. So that's what happened at that point. I'll never do it again because I've lost the interest in it. But I've never lost the interest in visiting fans, both in America, where there's still a couple, and in Europe, where there's so many.
Aren't you also doing recoloring for some of the books to have them the way you wanted them?
Well, that's what I mean. Every single publisher, like right now, I did it for the Hall of Fame, the German Hall of Fame, and the German, the Don Rosa collection, a great big 9-volume set. I mean, what I do is inspect every panel and tell them what needs to be recolored, if it's incorrectly colored, or the sound effects are not where they're supposed to be, and then I have somebody, like here in Germany, with Jano, or each country, it's I appoint, not somebody at the company, because I can't read, their version of my dialogue. I have a fan to read it for me and tell me if it's accurate. They check it against the American edition, which I can check myself. And they tell me what to tell the publisher to change. It's pretty interesting. The fan I just relay to the publisher. It probably irritates them, but they don't have any choice. So now I can be, if they put my name on it, I know it's my dialogue and everything is correct. But I did that for Egmont, Ihapa, and I'm currently doing it for an excellent French publisher, Lenat, who publishes just high-class stuff. They have not the Disney Comics license, but they got the license like Fantagraphics Books in America does to publish collections of one writer or one artist. Like both companies do the Floyd Gottfredson collection and Karl Barks collection, and now both companies are doing this Don Rosa library. And, but they both give me the chance to inspect every single panel, and like in France, I find a fan who reads it and then relays. But this company, this Glenat, you heard, it's one of the biggest companies in France. They're very concerned. They're happy to change the set. I was afraid, like, the Disney publishers have already got the work done and they can just use the material as it is and not have to pay anybody to change things. But Glenat has to pay somebody to rewrite the dialogue after I've told them what needs to be changed, but they're glad to do it because they're actually concerned that the comics are presented correctly for an adult audience. So that's a refreshing change. And Fantagraphics in America does the same thing. And it's finally seeing the work, especially Fantagraphics. I mean, there's been Don Rosa libraries, as far as I know, all over the world. There's been them in Indonesia, or in Indochina rather, with my name on them. And I have no control over them, and I can't read them. But now, Fantagraphics in America is doing a Don Rosa library that I can read. And I'm looking forward to reading it, because I haven't looked at the stories since they were first published, because they're just in individual issues with Gladstone Comics hidden away in boxes in my vault, my comic vault, so I haven't gotten them out since then, so now I'll be reading the Don Rosa stories for them.
I think you would like them.
I probably do, because they probably have just my sort of sense of humor. I love it when I read a comedy, read jokes in a story that I've forgotten I've written, because I laugh harder than anybody, because I'm like, that's just my sense of humor. It's perfect. So I've got a big kick out of it.
Did you ever think of writing for other artists?
It's what, Disney Comics?
No.
It'll still be in the same system. I won't contribute to that system in any way. But I don't know. Like I say, I don't have an interest in telling stories anymore. I have an interest in growing chili peppers and going camping.
Yeah, you didn't bring any chilies because it's not autumn.
Yeah. No, normally it's, for the last 10 or 15 years, all my visits to Germany and Europe in general have been in the autumn, so I can bring a whole suitcase full of chili peppers from my garden.
Is it allowed to import them?
Oh yeah, but I can't take them back. But I don't intend to. It's funny that they're so careful about, nobody seems to care what I take into Europe, but I can't take anything, you know, like vegetation back to America, and yet it's in America we have poison ivy. And you've got to be sure nobody brings any poison ivy to Europe. It's awful stuff, really. It took me 20 years to kill all of it in my yard, my nature preserve. But yeah, I would always come in the fall, and I'd bring literally a suitcase this big with nothing but thousands of chili peppers, and I'd give them away. You'd have a big basket on every time I did a signing. But now this time, I'm not coming with chili peppers, but I come to get my spargel. I love spargel. That's what I missed from, I used to come to Erlangen, and I think one year in Hamburg. That was always in the spring, so I'd always have plenty of spargel. I love spargel. So I'll make up for it. I'll bring chili peppers in the fall.
Oh, he doesn't. Well, I'd like to thank you from the bottom of my heart for the answers you've given so far, and I'd like to open a short session of questions from the audience. Anybody have any questions?
I don't know about you, but all I see is black, so
Felix, can I put your hand above your eyes? There's one back there.
Can you talk more about the Rosa collection coming out in the US now? What's in that? Every story you did?
It's just like, have you seen the Hall of Fame? The German Hall of Fame books?
Only because the whole Rosa collection in my modern thing.
Oh, well, it's, now, they wouldn't have done this, but I made sure that they would not do that 9-volume Don Rosa collection in America. That would look absurd in America. They haven't done something like, because that's my life story. It's got comics I did when I was 5 years old in there. Things, envelopes that I sent to a friend in college. They haven't done something like that to Will Eisner or Jack Kirby. That would be so humiliating in America. People in America would see that $800 book set of it. Don Rosa. Who the hell is Don Rosa? Because nobody in America knows that Disney comics. But they're doing, it's like the Hall of Fame series, which preceded the Don Rosa collection. It's like the Don Rosa Light collection. It's just all the duck stories in chronological order and with the text, the same text. And it'll take a few things out of the fancier Don Rosa collection, like that set of envelopes I sent to my friend in college. Everybody seems to think those were amusing.
There was the young lady down there.
Hi.
Yeah.
I would like to know more about that.
Oh, I'd like to talk about that because that's caused me a lot of trouble. That was in Der Dauntless, Donald Duck fan magazine, the German Donald Duck fan magazine. I think in 1990, what they would do on other occasions, and on this occasion, they gave a number of cartoonists, both amateur and professional, a sentence, and we were supposed to do an illustration based on the sentence. And in this instance, it was, "Hey Donald, whatever happened to Scrooge?" And people did different things. Some were weird, some were kind of obscene. But me, I take it all too seriously, so I had them standing over Scrooge's grave. And just said, you know, his final adventure was a doozy or something that maybe I don't even remember what it was. So it was just for the appearance in this one fanzine, a gag feature in the fanzine. Then it got onto the internet and in the old out of context. So people didn't know this was done as a gag feature in a fanzine. They thought I was purposely doing this depressing scene about Scrooge's death just for the malicious joy of telling people he's dead. And although I think he would be dead, he has to be dead in the year even in 1990, he'd be too old. So people were getting upset about that. So I even had I think a saved email. So when people would write me and complain about that, I could fire this email back to explain what it was. It was just a joke that was shown out of context. So that's what it was he referred to as the death scene.
There's a question here.
Can you something tell me about the art edition of IDW?
IDW? That's the one of the other really good American companies that publishes lots of newspaper reprints and lots of non-superhero stuff for a change. But they also do a series of giant books, expensive books, that are shot directly from original artwork. They've done some superhero titles. They've done a number of EC, when they found people who have full EC stories from the 50s. And this is, the original artwork always looks interesting because it's got like coffee stains on it and lots of marginal notes. And you can see the pencil that doesn't print in the regular comics. All sorts of interesting corrections, and these are all done the full size of the original artwork, and it looks exactly, it's black and white artwork shot in full color, so it looks like, you could never afford some of this original artwork, but here it looks exactly like the original artwork, all the imperfections. So they've done it for lots of old comics and newer comics, and they wanted, for a couple of years, they wanted to do the Life of Scrooge, and I said, well, that's not going to work, because my artwork is, I'm not saying it's good, it's not good artwork, but it's perfect, it's clean, it's on, I've always worked on 3-ply plate finish, 100% rag, archival quality Strathmore Bristol board. I don't know why, nobody told me not to. It's what I found at the university store back in 1972. And I always erase every bit of the pencils, and it's just perfect. There's no marks on it, there's no, even when I put marginal notes, they blot it out. So they just kept at me, and but what they finally said was that they'd also like to use the storyboard scripts. When I do, and they haven't done that in any of the other IDW artists' editions, they take my original scripts that I would send to the publisher, which is like a mock-up comic book page. It has all the dialogue written out by hand, and then has drawings of each panel, to show you where the characters, what they're doing, and it's sketched in. So they're using all of those, plus, and when they do that, they have entire stories that were rejected. So I think that's something that might be interesting to readers, even if they get bored of looking the perfectly white. Sometimes people have looked at my original artwork, and they swear, they say, well, no, show me some original artwork. It's perfect, it's done, and I have to, sometimes I can't prove to them that it's original artwork, because there's no, I think that they should be able to see all the whiteout. It's not that it's, there's a lot of mistakes. But people think there's a lot of detail in my artwork. You have to see it before I would. What I would do is just let the detail just flow out of me when I was inking. And then at night I'd get up after a nap, go back, and after I'd put all that detail in there, I would get out the whiteout, and I just white out vistas of detail. So you don't know how lucky you were. You didn't see all the full range of detail I would put in those things. So you might see some whiteout on those. That's, I don't know how you can buy that if you're interested in it. It's problematic. It costs like $150 or $160, and you can only buy it through a dealer. And Disney got involved again because IDW can't sell products outside of the United States. So I don't know how Europeans can buy that. I might have to travel to America to get it. Or I might have to bring them one. I can only fit one in my suitcase every trip.
Or use Amazon. They're selling everything outside the States, even if
However,
it's not allowed to.
And I buy mostly off eBay, and I don't know if it's the same deal.
Yeah.
It's the same deal. Amazon dictates the amount of postage, so they can't, it's a one book, and they're going to have to send it to Europe for $5. And this is like a 20-pound book, so they can't do it. I don't know how they can, nobody can send it. That's why so many eBay sellers say not for sale to a European, because they can't afford to ship it to Europe, because PayPal, eBay dictates the maximum amount of postage they can charge. And it's not enough to get it to Europe.
Yes.
So I have
the other way.
So I have no advice. It's an interesting book, but mostly for those storyboard scripts in the back.
But if you want to see some storyboard scripts, you can still go to the Fischbacher showroom, where they have, I think, 8 or 16 pages of his original scripts.
Where?
Oh, you saw them today, didn't you look at them? on the left side of the
The little
exhibition.
scribbled,
Yeah, the
I'll take your word
scribbles.
for it, I didn't see that.
Oh my
But I'm not
goodness.
very interested in my own artwork, so I
Okay.
didn't pay much attention.
That's not a problem with me, but I just want to tell the audience if they want to see it before they
Okay,
couldn't get the books, they'd have a chance to see it here in Munich
okay.
during the Comic Festival. And if anybody is also interested in getting books or posters signed by Rosa, it's possible outside. There's at the reception desk, one can get the books and the posters, and as far as I know, there will be a table at which you can sign the books. So if you are interested in that, you can get them. And I'm cutting short the discussion right now because my Donald Duck watch tells me
Something important happening at 9
yeah,
o'clock.
but at 9 o'clock we have to be off the stage.
Yeah.
I'd rather prefer walking off stage instead of being carried.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, thank you once again. It's always nice talking with you. The first time I did a long interview with you, I had to ask Jana to tape it because it
Oh,
was...
yeah, you did an interview.
That's on the
You did an
internet.
interview with me and you weren't even there.
Yeah, that's right. You read my
Yeah.
questions, and it can be seen on the internet on YouTube. All 1 hour and 45 minutes.
I'm not gonna lie.
We did
It's too much.
it in 2 sessions,
Yeah.
and they had lunch in between the first part and the second part.
It was the same trip when he did the house tour, I guess.
Okay,
Okay, yeah.
thanks again, and thanks for listening.